you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. What is the long-term effect of too much information?
Information, I just need some information. I've been dying. Is it lack of education? I've been reading without any transformation. I'm addicted. Is it overstimulation? Hey.
Welcome to the Sixth Sense Report.
Hear ye, come one, come all. You are listening to the Sixth Sense Report with Darnell Samuels and Joel Nikoloff.
What up, bro?
I'm good, Joe. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Been reading some. I've been studying economics again.
Oh, really?
Cracking out some Murray Rothbard.
Okay. Okay, that's a good look. So today we got a special episode for you. We have a special friend. None other than, or I should say, the artist formerly known as Chosen. Right?
Oh,
the host of Dollar Savvy.
That was a while ago. My goodness.
The host of Dollar Savvy, Seun Adeyemi.
Yes. Glad to be here.
Welcome.
For having me. Oh man, you bringing back memories. Man. That's how you know we go way back.
Yeah, you and Chope doing your thing. Oh man, that was way back, man.
Yeah, we're talking 15 years?
Yes.
At least.
Yeah, you were the vocalist.
Yeah.
And Chope was the rapper.
I still try to hold a tune every now and then, but just behind the scenes, man, not in public.
Oh, that's a good look. So for the audience, so Sean has his own podcast, Dollar Savvy. Why don't you tell us about it?
Well, the Dollar Savvy podcast, I'm a financial planner. And so I approach a lot of things I do from a biblical perspective because I'm a Christian first and then a financial planner second. And so what that means is that I see everything through the lens of scripture in terms of how you manage money, how you view money, what money means to you. And so what that podcast really is to help Christians integrate their faith with their finance, with how they see money. We talk a lot about stewardship. We talk a lot about where your treasure is, where your heart is, and just making sure that money is not a god to you. And so how does that look like in the practical day-to-day and the things you do and the decisions you make? So we talk a lot about that on the podcast. So that's really what the podcast is about.
Okay, wow.
Biblical wisdom for today's money matters. That's in a snapshot. That's what
What's your tagline?
That's my tagline.
Okay. Well, here we are. So we have Dollar Savvy. We have the 6 cents report. So we got $1.06.
That's all we got.
That's all we got, baby. That's all we got. We're rich. Okay, all right, yo, this is beautiful, man. So we have the financial planner, we have the accountant, and we have the guy who failed grade 11 math. So, man, we're
Darnell's
gonna kill
got
it.
nothing to say. What?
No, I got a lot to say because I failed grade 11 math. So
You've got lots of questions.
and 10. Yeah. So I got a lot of questions. So I'm representing for those guys, who decided to go play dominoes.
Mathematically challenged.
I decided to play dominoes instead of being in class.
A Jenga.
Yeah. So praise God. So all right. So we're gonna be picking apart this article found on CBC, and it's about the lack of inheritance tax making inequality worse. So there's a think tank study that suggests that Canada is the only G7 country without a federal inheritance tax. So for the listeners, how would you guys break down what is an inheritance tax?
I think the simplest way is just comprehending on a high level that when you die and assets are transferred to your family, taxation is slightly different than your regular taxation year to year. So you have final year returns. There's other taxes and fees you can be subject to. And there's ways to minimize that tax, especially in Canada. Whereas, some other countries don't necessarily, let's say, give the same consideration for some circumstances that allow you to avoid it's called probate taxes for the most part, but we're just using inheritance tax as a generic term.
Okay.
Yeah, that's. I mean, Joel said it right. There is a cost to dying, really, and so a lot of things that we may not even think about across our minds is that it can be expensive to die, but nonetheless, Canada is still relatively inexpensive compared to the G7 nations, and so for those with a lot of wealth, uh, the survivors that get the wealth, they can get a lot of these things. There's no inheritance tax in Canada essentially, so a lot more is left to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing.
Well, from the article's perspective, it's not. I mean, the article is inherently based on wealth redistribution is a good thing. Inequality sounds like inequality inherently is a bad thing versus I would say my position with regards to inequality is that inequality that is a result of freedom and not government favors or exploitation is necessary is a result of freedom, right? So people make different choices. I mean, we've talked about this before, but I think there's a premise within this article that we need to minimize inequality, even though if I can come up with scenarios where equality, everybody's worse off than the person at the lowest ends of the spectrum of inequality. And I'll take that. I'll be the low person on the inequality scale over being in Venezuela right now, where they're all equally starving and dying. So, I think the question around inheritance tax is interesting. It's a transfer of wealth from the person who created it to society as a whole. And I mean, what are as a financial planner for your customers or your clients, how do you view let's call it the little inheritance tax that we already do incur?
Well, without planning, there's a lot lost to the government without proper planning, and I find that the equality gap widens the lower down the scale you get because there isn't proper planning put in place to ensure that the survivors get more of what you have and you're leaving behind. And so I find the wealthy plan these things very well. And when I mean wealthy is a very there's a scale to it, right? A lot of people may not consider themselves wealthy, but they actually are. But we'll come back to that in a second. But the idea here is that the wealthier you are, the more planning is often done to ensure that your wealth is passed on properly to your next of kin or to your survivors. And as you go down that scale, when there isn't proper planning done, there's a lot of wealth that is lost in the process, either through probate fees, either through taxes, or even through mistakes your survivors will make as they're trying to wind down your estate that ends up costing them a whole lot more, some of them irreversibly.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, a simple example is like RSPs. If you don't, there's ways to transfer RSPs tax efficiently, and there's ways to do it very inefficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Because, if somebody, a parent had like $500,000 in RSPs and dies at like 55, and it's not transferred as efficiently as possible, you can be hit with essentially a marginal tax rate of 50%.
That's half of that goes
to
the government.
Because you didn't plan or what he was saying, you as a survivor didn't transfer it efficiently. Maybe you didn't seek the right professional help. Maybe you got professional help and they made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
There's, in essence, bad planning causes your family to lose wealth.
That further widens the gap.
Yeah.
Right.
And well, to your point, right? The higher you are on the wealth spectrum, the more likely you are to plan ahead, which means you're more likely to have the most tax efficient solution.
So more of your wealth is being passed.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And so the
Yeah.
wealthy stay wealthier, and the lower, the poorer lose more of their wealth
Right.
because they didn't plan.
Right. So what trends do you see, Sean, like when you work with your clients?
Unfortunately, I find that amongst some of my clients who are my race, when I talk about the topic of will, I find that I have to keep pushing and I keep pushing and keep bringing a reminder up. And I find that breaks my heart because I know that without a proper will, there are no clear instructions as to how to pass on this wealth. Because when you're going through the process of preparing a will, a lawyer would often highlight few things that you need to address. Things like having your beneficiaries on your RSPs, on your pensions at work, and those things. So lawyer would usually do that, which helps you transfer your wealth more efficiently. But if you haven't even started the process of that, you have so many open gaps that
You're ignorant.
you're ignorant. And so I'm finding that I hate to say it, amongst my Black clients, I'm having to keep pushing and pushing and say, let's get your wills done. These are all your investments. I'll do the little that I can, like making sure all your TFSAs, your RSPs, and those things have beneficiaries on it, or your insurance policies or your segregated funds, all those things have beneficiaries on it. But there are certain things that I have limitations as a financial planner in what I can do. Some of those other things have to be stated in the will. But if you don't sit down with a lawyer to do that, then it doesn't get done.
Mhm.
On the other spectrum, I find a lot of my Caucasian clients, or other races for that matter, I say, let's get a will done. I introduce them to some of the lawyers we work with. Within about a week, a month or so, they've already communicated with the professionals. And even if the will is not complete,
It's in
they're going
process.
through the process.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right. And so that's once again widens the gap because we're not taking wills seriously. And it's almost like the subject of will or death is a taboo because you feel like somehow if I get a will done, then I'm going to die sooner. I remember speaking to, you know what? This is even a personal story. I'll give you an example. I have an insurance policy on my mom.
Mhm.
I pay for it. Well, my brothers and I, we pay for it. And I said, because this is important. I told my mom about it years ago. My mom she doesn't care so much about it.
No, you're the benefactor. You're the payee.
Exactly.
She's just the object.
And then when was it? Maybe a few months ago. It's like, so you guys actually have a policy for me? Do you think I'm gonna die? I'm like, it's not
Eventually.
I'm like, yeah, eventually. It's not because I think you're gonna die soon, but you will die. I am 30 plus years younger than you, and I have an insurance policy, not because I think I'm gonna die, but because I have loved ones that I don't want to live a baggage to in terms of how they're able to fare once I'm gone. And so just that mindset that I painted with my mom is a mindset that is prevalent amongst the not so wealthy and a lot of my African American or my Black clients.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when you're talking, I'm thinking about my family. So a lot of times when this issue comes up, it's like, are you trying to kill me? Like, are you trying to off me so you can get some money? Like, what's going on? But
Right.
I think part of it is that the financial illiteracy. So a lot of times, finances are secret,
Right.
like secret from your neighbors, but also secret from your
family members.
because it's kind of like, I don't want to see them where I'm really at. I don't want my brothers or sisters. I don't want my kids to really know where I'm at because either I'm embarrassed because I've squandered wealth, and I don't want them to see me as, okay, well, I don't have much. Yeah, so a lot of times those kind of things, the insecurity of not having, feeling like you're not having enough. So I don't think it's an issue of not caring, but more so an issue of like, kind of like there's an insecurity to say, okay, look, I don't have enough. I've squandered this wealth. I don't have much to leave you, and so forth. But yeah, but part of it is like, yeah, when you're talking about the income gap, the disparity, at some point, it's on the ground level. Like, you really can't say it's at the top. Like, okay, well, we need to create this policy so that more money can trickle down and balance things out. Well, no, it's actually in the home. It's like the conversation you have to have with your dad and be like, yo, dad, how much, we need to set up this will.
Yeah.
Like, what do you got? Right?
Yep.
Do you have any other kids that we don't know about? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, because
Right.
next thing you know, you at the funeral, you divvying up money to this guy you don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Someone's claiming a stake.
Yo,
right?
bro,
Yeah.
it's real talk. You know what I mean? So these are the things you got to clean up your.
Well, and I
your
think
act.
there's a lack of comprehension in the ease a will creates. So as much as we've talked about, financially doing things more efficient, creating structure such that it's more tax effective. The other side of it is the stress that your family is going to go through, because in essence, if there is no will, I almost want to say your wealth transfers to the state, and then the state has to give it back to you. Obviously, when I say state, I mean government. But,
Okay.
The government essentially owns your stuff until they determine how does it get allocated. And without a will, it's just so much opportunity for whether it's infighting, the long lost child who's claiming a stake, or just simply the process of going through it. Who's responsible? Who has a say? All these things that just, your family members are going to have to take time off work or whatever it is to meet with officials and process these things, transferring of accounts, transferring of balances. That's just undue stress.
And to add to that, we make the worst decisions when we're emotionally vulnerable. And so when you don't have a will and you pass, first of all, your loved ones are in pain. They're going through a lot emotionally because you're no longer around. And so now they have to make these financial decisions that you should have at least put certain things in place. And because in that vulnerable state, they're making a lot of mistakes. And that's costing them the wealth that you've built, or however little or small you think that is. It's reducing the amount that they eventually get. And so, just like Joel said, they're losing time off work, having to go file this paper. Not just file the paper, there's fees for filing these papers. Okay, to become the executor of their estate, they have to pay this. They go to City Hall to pay these. They go to City Hall to pay these. I have to take this time off work. I have to take this time off work. There's so much paperwork I need to do. And I haven't slept all night because I've been crying, right? So,
Make a bad situation worse.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So we've been throwing around the term wealth.
So I want to say one thing with
Yeah.
regards to, before we move on from a will, is like, I'll make sure I include a podcast in the show notes page, but it's especially in the US when you've got such a variety from state to state, the need, and even in Canada, the need to have a professional input on it, especially when you start to say like, oh, I have more than $1,000 in my bank account. And that's, obviously if that's all you have, you could probably write your will on a piece of paper and get away with it. But as you start to have even just, oh, I have this car, I have, a house, or maybe you don't even have a house, but you have certain things. I have an insurance policy, I have this or that. Having a legal professional have eyes on it to make sure that you haven't missed things. It's going to cost you money, right? Could you try to download something from the internet? Sure. But do you really want to spend 3 days doing research to try to figure it out? Or are you willing to pay someone a couple $100, or, maybe you got to pay $500. But if it's going to save you $500 worth of lost taxes and the stress and burden of your family, it's worth the money.
Even the things that you may not put a dollar value to, right? Heirlooms, things that have passed on from grandparents and great grandparents that now belong to you. Your family now has to figure out who gets what. And that can further create infighting. You have, just like you said, your car, you name it. We all have different things, especially a lot of us as immigrants. There's some things that, for the first generation people, at least, that our parents may have brought to Canada, that means a lot to the family, and then begin to figure out how do you dispose of that, or how do you keep that, or who gets that. It's a lot of
Drama.
Yeah. So moving
Right.
on to wealth.
Yeah. So okay. So just so we don't get too far ahead of ourselves, but also for the listener, which is helpful, just practical information. Define wealth.
In my opinion, wealth is having more than enough. And I'll explain that. If you can provide for your family the basic necessities, food, shelter, clothing, and maybe in today's day, we may add a few other things there that
Are fundamental.
are fundamental to your job. Let's say a cell phone, an inexpensive plan, something that has internet. Even that could be a stretch in terms of calling that a need. But if you can provide for the basics and necessities and a little more, in my opinion, you have wealth. You have a lot more wealth than 90% of the world's population. And so the idea that I don't have a lot, so I don't need a will, let's debunk that. You do need a will.
I think in order to define wealth, and especially in the way that you define it, which is like more than enough. Well, what is enough? And I would say, let's figure out, how do we define poverty? Right? So I think if I can provide for my basic needs, then, or sorry, better ways, if I can't provide for my basic needs, the things that you referenced, then I'm in poverty. But what does that look like quantitatively? Right? I think, if you're a single person, hey, if your rent is $1,500 a month, is that the minimum of what actually you can get away with? Right? Versus, I could probably rent a room and shared accommodations for $500. Right? Similarly, how much do I spend on food? Maybe $150. Now, obviously that means no eating out. I'm buying the cheapest stuff. I'm buying, basic groceries, probably cooking all my own food, which means I have to spend more time. All these types of things. Clothing, minimum, maybe $50 a month. Transportation, I came up with a number of 200 thinking, okay, transit pass plus maybe a little bit more. And then for me, the best example is, as you said, phone. But let's put phone, TV, internet in a category. How many people have a $300 phone, TV, internet bill?
A lot.
If you're really trying to save, you might have the ability to lower that down to $75 to $100. I have a basic phone line, unlimited internet at home, and I only operate on Wi-Fi.
Right.
Now, that might suck in a sense. You might be, inconvenienced by that, but you can get away with that. And my point is more, hey, guess what? From a poverty perspective, that's under $1,000 a month in income. And if you're working full time, you would only need to be making $6 an hour to achieve that. So obviously, if there's 2 or 3 people in your family, 4 people, you're trying to provide, the numbers can change obviously pretty significantly. But my point is, how many people start with recognizing, okay, I can get away with spending as little as this. And hey, guess what? Maybe you feel like spending an extra $100 a month to have a car makes sense for you. And you're willing to sacrifice the extra savings to have a car. But if you're doing that by taking on debt, okay, fine. Then you're close to poverty. That's a different conversation. But if you're sacrificing your excess, essentially you're sacrificing your wealth in order to consume today. Right? If you have a $300 TV, internet, cell phone bill, but you're barely paying all of your bills, that means you can value consuming today more than in the future. And you're essentially sacrificing wealth because you're not willing to save. So do we put that on society for saying, well, you have more than your needs, you've consumed a whole bunch of wants, and I don't have enough? To me, there's a disconnect between who's responsible here.
Wow. Yeah. Pastor Joel Nikoloff. Pass the collection plate, man.
He said he went better than I could.
I'm getting convicted. I'm getting convicted. I'm like, oh, is he talking to me?
How does he know my cell phone bill?
That was solid, Joel. So let me ask you guys this: what, as of right now, like this is for a person who has, let's say, 2 kids, and just has his little savings account, doesn't have much, but wants to leave an inheritance for his kids. Well, what would you guys recommend the place to start?
I mean, it's his area of expertise, but insurance.
Insurance is the most basic you should have.
Life insurance?
Life insurance. And life insurance can be so cheap, especially when you're younger. And
Sorry, what's younger?
I mean, in your 20s.
Okay.
Even 30s.
Even 30s.
Like,
you can get a pretty cheap, inexpensive term life insurance policy, $500,000, 22 for about $30 a month.
Yeah. And so straight up, I'm 33. I did mine. Was I 33 or 32? Whatever. I got the super preferred rate because I'm super healthy. And I'm paying like $24 a month for basically what he just described.
Okay. And sorry, just quickly, how much does a funeral cost these days?
Final expenses, not just funeral. So that includes the morgue, includes all the stuff people you have to pay.
Plot of land, tombstone.
On the average funeral final expense costs about $25,000.
Okay.
The government may give you $2,500. That's it.
If you're impoverished.
And that's on the high end talking about here. Right? So when you think about the final expenses plus the lost wages because you're no longer there, plus your kids and the kind of lifestyle they will have, just replacing your income, even if you don't replace anything else and all the replacing the net income you're bringing every month for at least 10 to 20 years makes a big difference in how much wealth is transferred to the next generation.
And that's how life insurance works.
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way to look at it would be, you can go to 20 years. You don't have to. I mean, if I think I got $500,000 coverage. The idea being that my wife could continue to raise our kids, and to the point of, let's say they're in school, so then she can work full time and try to take care of the kids, right? Or, I mean, obviously there's family and other people involved, but if you do a multiplier and you're like, oh, my income works out to like $600,000-$700,000 for 20 years, can you really afford that? Maybe not, right? Like now you're talking getting a policy that's getting closer to $50 or $60 potentially, right? But think about, okay, what's the bare minimum that I think my family needs to survive without me? And I think we should come back to the point about the way policies generally work is you lock in on a term life insurance policy, right? When I'm 50 years old, do my kids really need me to be able to leave them money? Well, chances are they're all old enough. I mean, maybe 50 is a little young, but they're almost all old enough to start working and take care of themselves.
Correct.
Right? So you essentially sign a policy term at a young age so that for that time period where they can't provide for themselves, I have security. And so can you afford $20 a month? You can make it work. And if you sign that policy at like 20 years old, before you have any of these responsibilities, and you're like, oh, I'm going to sign for 30 years at 20, well, guess what? Because the risk of you dying in the first 10 years is so low, your policy is so cheap, like under $20.
Mm-hmm. And just even think about how much do we spend on cell phone bills? Let's use that for example. You would rather have $100, $70 cell phone bill than to have a life insurance policy that, let's even say, costs you that same $70.
Right.
Like if you were to scrape little here and there, cut a little bit on groceries, cut down a little bit on your cell phone, cut down a little.
Cut out data from your cell phone.
Cut out data, or there's ways to make it work. Essentially, is what we're saying.
It's about
for
priorities.
inexpensive cost.
Priorities, right?
Priorities, yeah.
Right, because it's one of those things when you look at like lifestyle inflation and the way we live in this culture, and I think it's important for us, well, especially as Christians, to understand that what God has called us to, good stewardship, good financial stewardship, and living humbly, right? Because we live, kind of like that old saying, like you don't know what you need till you go to the mall. Right?
Right.
You know what I mean? You walk through the mall and you're like, oh, shoot, actually, I do need a new pair of pants. Oh, wait, the new J's are out? Oh, actually, you know what? I don't have them in black.
So I need it.
Sneakerhead.
No, you don't.
Sneakerhead.
All right, you know what I mean? But it's one of those things where, financial literacy to me is like, and, I'm not being super spiritual, but to me, it's like the gospel. Especially when I talk to you, Sean, about these things, like it points out my sin. It points out my inefficiencies. Yeah, my covetousness. Like
Discontentment.
Bro. And it just shows it to me. And then like after I gotta like go home and repent and be like, okay, well, like, like, what am I doing? Like I got my money coming in and I'm squandering it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going in one hand and out the other, and you're turning around and saying, oh, I don't have anything.
One of the things that pains me is sometimes people make excuses that, okay, you know what, once I get a raise, or when I get a bonus at the end of the year, or once I make a little more money, I'll do this, I'll save, or I'll get that insurance policy. I'm just waiting for that raise. I'm just waiting for that increase. But when that increase happens, we tend to increase our lifestyle. For the gentleman or the person living on $2,000 a month, he's able to make it work. It's not convenient, but he's able to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
He gets that pay raise to $2,300, $2,400. Does that mean he begins to save $300? No, that rarely ever happens.
Mm-hmm.
He just increases his lifestyle right in line with that.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it goes back to priorities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I mean, without rabbit trailing this conversation, I would say a huge part of that problem is we are incentivized, or we're de-incentivized to save, and we're incentivized to consume, because that's the paradigm of belief for the economy that is what we need.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's this within the Keynesian view economic model. Consumption is
Oh, sorry. Quickly define Keynesian.
It's essentially the mainstream view of economics. There's getting into so much. Me and you would contrast it with the Austrian view. In general, comes down to where you would see the differences really in money and banking, and the concept of government intervention in money supply and money control. But the reason I'm going there is, like, especially in Canada right now, and I mean it's North America, it's all across the world. How low are our interest rates? Interest rates represent the future value of my money. If I'm only getting a 1% return, well, I got $100 today or $101 next year. Well, that's a different equation than if I had the ability to earn 5%, 6%. I know, talking 100 versus 106, but then compound that. Over time, I start to be more incentivized to actually save when the interest rates are what I would call normal, versus this arbitrarily low amount.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I have a question for you too. In regards, so you take care of your life insurance, so you have that, and you want to accumulate more assets, more wealth. So stocks, houses. What do you guys say about that?
I usually say for the average person, it's a combination of hard assets and paper assets. Your hard assets is your real estate, and your paper assets are your stocks, your ETFs, your bonds, and those things. There are other places to invest. The more discretionary income you have, businesses, private businesses, and there's a lot that you can invest in. But even for the average person, you can't afford a house, start with a TFSA. Have that invested for you. Wealthsimple has a pretty inexpensive platform. You can start investing for like $25 a month. Start putting that away.
Yeah, I think what you're the latter part of what you're saying is most important to me, which is like every time you get paid, are you saving something? Every time you pay your bills, are you going, oh, there goes all my paychecks, right? Or all the income got spent on everything. We don't really have anything to save, right? Just that, creating the habit of 10% of my paycheck, 5% of my paycheck is savings. Where it goes is to me step 2. If you don't have that attitude of I have to save a certain amount, or alternatively, if you just finished school, a certain amount is paying down my debt. Right? Get that debt away from me. And then when the debt's gone, just continue the habit into your savings.
I have a client that I would consider not even middle class. Makes maybe about $35,000 a year. Started saving like $50 per paycheck, maybe like 3-4 years ago. When I looked into her accounts, maybe a few weeks ago, she had almost 10 grand. How did that happen? It's just a small habit. She saves $50 a paycheck. Compound that with the growth over the last 5 years. That's how come she's had that much. The math may not make sense if you're thinking 50 times 12 times 5, but every time she gets a little money here and there, her tax return, her tax refund,
drop it in
there. Drop $1,000 from her tax refund. She gets a little bonus at work for whatever, drops $200 in there.
Right. It's the habit of, okay, I need to put money away, right? Are we, right? Like I would say, I mean, we were talking to Sam Say, he's like, we have a covetousness problem, right? Culturally, I would say we have a materialistic problem because we value stuff today, spending money. Like, I don't know about you, man, but I enjoy spending money. Like, it feels good, but it's not necessarily a good thing. To be honest, I hate spending money when I have to. I love spending money when I don't have to. Right? When you get hit with that, like, oh, you got to pay for this, accident you got in, you're like, this is brutal. But if you had $1,000 to spend on a vacation instead, you're like, this is amazing. I love it. So I think the habits around money, the habits regarding savings, thinking like, oh, I'll do that later. No, sacrifice, ordering pizza every Friday when you don't have that money. Right? So I think, I would say I probably have a different view in terms of where to put your money. I mean, I'm wearing a Goldmoney t-shirt right now.
Oh yeah, we gotta talk about that after the show.
Go ahead, check it.
I didn't mean to ask you, but anyways,
I believe in the gold standard, by the way.
That's between me and my co-host.
That's another rabbit trail.
Yeah. But the point being, like, I'm not telling you take 100% of your wealth and put it in gold. No. Perfect example. Kevin O'Leary. He's like 10% of his portfolio is in wealth or is in gold. Sorry. So if gold price goes up, he sells the excess. Gold price goes down, he buys more. It's, without getting into the nuances, there's value in having it as a diverse part of your portfolio.
Yeah.
That might mean you have $1,000. Well, guess what? $500 is in a TSFA, maybe $400 in RRSP, and $100 is in
an
gold.
emergency fund.
Yeah, or cash. Like, you if something comes up, you can boom. I don't have to go to the bank. I don't have to worry about. I got the money. Pay for my, take care.
And
of
you know what? And that's a beautiful thing because I was watching. I can't remember what I was watching, but it had to do with the NBA and the Golden State Warriors. And most of those guys on the Golden State Warriors, like Iguodala, Curry, Kevin Durant, they have investments. And so the thing in their locker room is all they talk is their investments, and they brag about whose investments are doing better than others. I remember back in the 90s.
That's a locker room I want to be in.
Bro. And it is funny because Kevin Durant's real arrogant about it. He's like, so how's that investment doing? Oh, it's not as good as mine. And then they're going back and forth. I remember back in the early 90s, that's not what guys were bragging about. They were bragging about chains, cars, and things that devalue.
Like Iverson?
Yeah.
Practice? Constantly changing jerseys every city he goes.
Jerseys, leaving clothes behind.
And now he's almost broke that he has to wait till his 40 or 50 or something to get the money in trust.
Yeah.
Like it's
Well, it sounds like he protected himself from himself, but
well, Reebok protected him from himself.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it was
true.
Reebok who did it for him. They're like, hey, let me help you out, little brother.
yeah, we're gonna put this money away for you. Good call.
Yeah.
But again, I would say like that's a societal issue with regards to how we view money,
Mm-hmm.
how we view consumption
Mhm.
versus saving.
Mhm.
Because if you look at it, your income is going to be split 100% between consumption and savings. Now, maybe 50% of it is completely non-discretionary, meaning it's going to things that you don't really have control over. As we talked about with the financial numbers I ran through, some of those are bare needs. Like 50% is probably gone to your needs. Maybe 75% is gone to your needs. But what are you doing with that last other portion that is potential savings? Are you just squandering it all on consumption? Or are you actually spending more than you make?
That's
Right.
even another
I mean,
conversation.
again, I would say that's at the root problem is our view of materialism and consuming goods
Mm-hmm.
versus help, even am I willing to donate?
Right. And it comes back to what Sean and what he does as a financial advisor, especially as a Christian one, because we're governed by these principles as Christians, to be good stewards and so forth. So we should be a lot more disciplined than we are now. But Sean, thank you for joining us and teaming up with us.
My pleasure.
This was a lot of fun.
Why don't you give the listener your contact information? Where can they reach out to you? Where can they find you if they want to invest?
You can find me on Twitter. Just send me a message at SA Capital Canada. Facebook, SA Capital Advisors. And you can also send an email to podcast@sacapital.ca.
Okay.
Cool. And we'll make sure we put all that contact information on our show notes page.
And guys, please make sure you subscribe to the Dollar Savvy podcast. I would describe it as, for me personally, I call it the Dollar Devo. I call it the Dollar Devo because
That's a good one.
no, bro, honestly, like sometimes the finances can get you down,
Mm-hmm.
and you can be broke, busted, and disgusted. But I'm telling you, when you listen to the Dollar Savvy podcast, I'm telling you, it just is such an encouragement. It brings you out of that stoop, and it makes you feel like, there's still hope. Like God is still going to do something through your finances. So me and my wife are always encouraged by it, and we always go back to it when we're finished paying the bills and there ain't much left, and we're looking like, okay, let's listen to Sean again, encourage us. There's hope for the next paycheck.
Thank you.
Yeah, yo, it's real talk. I'm not even just saying that. Like, guys, look it up. It's really dope, man.
All right.
Yeah, you can find it at sacapital.ca/podcast, and then you can listen to it on whatever app you use, whether that's iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or TuneIn. Yeah.
All right. So, listeners, hit us up. Let us know if you have questions about wealth, poverty, finances. Cool. Maybe in a future episode we can address those. So, at 6 Cents Report on Facebook and Twitter, and then 6centsreport@gmail.com.
But you heard me? Does that make sense?
Madden and Mitchell Media.